But we way before that. Yeah. Because I wrote about it. Okay, so we go back again. Yeah. A lot of years. A lot of years. And so that's the past and also
Okay, we are going to get started. We're going to get started. It's the worst case scenario. So I'm going to go first. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my God, look, see, it is important that you have applauded already, given the fact that we are among such beautiful people and all resolute geniuses, and which we are all going to be treated to, and enough to entice us to consider ourselves already in utopia. Which is exactly where all of us are bound, simply by being lovers of great music, great poetry, the arts as the avant-garde force for a just society. And so there's much for us to celebrate, and I know even though we are going to hear a total of 8 songs tonight, I also know that there will be banter in between, readings of bios and presentations of songs, and so we have to be cognizant of time, and we're going to be cognizant of time, so we are getting started now. My name is George Elliott Clark, and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about how this whole program got started. This is 5 poets breaking into song number 7, and it's almost, this program began practically 2 years ago in December of 2020. Terrible year, holy smokes, and since then we've had Doug Ford's been reelected. So things just go from bad to worse as far as I'm concerned. I'm sorry to get into the politics already, but in any event, I thought to honor my companion, Giovanna Riccio, right here, that...
I get applause just for being your companion?
No, see, the reason the applause is happening is that people are showing sympathy for you in being stuck with me, but to honor Giovanna, I decided that I would ask my good friend and operatic collaborator James Rolfe. A round of applause, please. Just to mention Jimmy Rolfe. I'm going to play with that. Jimmy Rolfe for a moment. No, James. To compose music for a selection of poems, or one poem that I sent him a selection. I forget how many exact. I think it was about a dozen. And I advocated powerfully. I think it turned out that it was powerfully enough for a particular poem by Giovanna called Namesake. When that song was sung back to Giovanna on Christmas Day of 2020, I managed to convince her to get in front of the computer screen to hear a relative of mine. It was through subterfuge, and of course you were astonished and surprised and brought to tears to hear the poem translated so beautifully into song. And when I saw her reaction, James's reaction, I thought, well, there are a number of poets who I believe should have a song. And so then that's how the process started. We did the first presentation by Zoom of a series of songs by different composers, including David Yeager and Emily Hiemstra. That was in May of 2021, and also James Rolfe. And that was very successful, we felt. And I partnered with East and West Learning Connections in order to get that first 5 poets breaking into song done. And so now we're on to number 7 tonight. I think that I've worked mainly with 2 composers, Dee Dee Jackson, based in New York, and of course James Rolfe, who's here tonight, of course, and we just introduced in a sense. But together between James and Dee Dee Jackson, they have together composed over about roughly 30 songs. 30 songs to 20 plus different Canadian poets of diverse backgrounds, and not because we're trying to say shout outs to multiculturalism, but because these poets are all so good and so deserving of being recognized as songsmiths as well as being poets, that just naturally that's the way it has developed. And you know, not to name drop, but we've even been so successful as to work with Leonard Cohen's very difficult estate, extremely difficult estate, in order to get permission to do one of his poems as a song. And I think that we are probably the first people to actually look at his poetry as opposed to the Cohen songbook, and to find something that we could put music to, and James did. And so it's been fun, though, dealing with folks in LA and in New York, you know, LA and New York, to work with Cohen's materials. But anyway, so far so good. And of course, works by a panoply, like Louise Bernice Half comes to mind, the current poet laureate. Al Moritz comes to mind as the current poet Toronto laureate. Ayesha Chatterjee comes to mind. Andrea Thompson comes to mind. I mean, there are just so many that we have been so delighted to write music for. So I'm going to step off the stage now, but I'm going to come back to read Irving Layton's poetry, just to like drop another name again. And then we've got Gwendolyn MacEwen also on tonight's program. But anyway, I do now want to invite Ian White, the Vice President of the East and West Learning Connections, to come to the podium.
Hello. Okay, thank you.
Shall we raise it a bit?
That's okay. I'll just shout down. It's all working.
Can't raise it anyway.
That's okay. Thanks so much.
I think I got it, Ian.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening. I love it when people say good evening back. That's really nice. I like the feedback. Welcome to this 7th iteration of transforming great works of poetry into great works of music. I am the Vice President of East and West Learning Connections. We're a nationally registered not-for-profit, and our essential goal is to break down cultural barriers and promote integration into Canadian society. We do this through a variety of methods, some learning, some communicating, some volunteering, and some mentoring. And the overall goal is really to work in 2 directions. One is to help people who are new to Canada integrate better by coming to a greater understanding of Canadian culture. And the other way is to enrich Canadian culture through the contributions of new Canadians. And I think one of the things that's just delightful about this evening is the idea of taking one art form and presenting it to another and allowing the 2 to inform each other and create a 3rd beautiful form. So that's what we're in for tonight. I'm delighted to be part of this. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here tonight representing East and West. I think, are we just going to get started? We're just going to get right into it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So our first performance is of a work by Irving Layton. Irving Layton was actually a Canadian poet from, well, he was born in 1912 and lived until 2006. He was actually born in Romania, and his parents moved to Montreal when he was just 1 year old. He produced lush and elemental poems, really explore sexual and spiritual intimacy. He was actually a bit of a poet pop star in the 1960s and had quite a reputation. as an enfant terrible. He garnered many, many honors through the course of his career. He was nominated twice for a Nobel Prize. He won the Italian Petrarch Prize for poetry. He was the recipient of grants from the Canadian Council. He won the Governor General's Award and the Senior Arts Fellowship. He also received several honorary degrees through the course of his career. Poet and singer Leonard Cohen, who has already been mentioned, was one of his students and became a very close friend. Among his survivors are 2 sons and a daughter, and it was actually his son, who is also a singer and poet, Max, who authorized the use of Irving's poem for this evening's performance. So back to you, George.
All right, Ian.
And we'll get started.
Thank you so much.
Great.
That was beautiful.
Thank you so
Beautiful.
much.
Thank you. So I want to reiterate our great thanks to Max for authorizing the creation of the song, and also who gave me a list of the poems by his late father that he would like to have read. So the first poem I'd like to read is titled The Swimmer, and it's a very important poem in Irving Layton's oeuvre. Because it was the first poem that he wrote, which I remember him saying that he wrote it on a restaurant in Montreal, napkin. And it's an extremely powerful and imagistic poem. It was first published in 1945. It's a poem that for him marked his really becoming a poet. The Swimmer. The afternoon foreclosing, see the swimmer plunges from his raft, opening the spray corollas by his act of war. The snakeheads strike quickly and are silent. Emerging, see how for a moment a brown weed with marvelous bulbs, he lies imminent upon the water, while light and sound come with a sharp passion from the gonad sea around the poles and break in bright cockle shells about his ears. He dives, floats, goes under like a thief, where his blood sings to the tiger shadows in the scentless greenery that leads him home. A male salmon down fretted stairways through underwater slums. Stunned by the memory of lost gills, he frames gestures of self-absorption upon the skull-like beach, observes with instigated eyes the sun that empties itself upon the water as the last wave romping in to throw its boyhood on the marbled sand. This next poem by Irving Layton is from 1954, and it speaks to the kind of interest in sexual intimacy and sexual intrigue that were very much a part of Irving Layton's oeuvre. So this poem is titled Misunderstanding for 1954. I placed my hand upon her thigh. By the way she moved away, I could see her devotion to literature was not perfect. Yeah, it's a little bit of a sexist thingamajig, but it's 1954, so you can almost say, all right. But this is a Song for Naomi from 1955, and I think I could say that along with the kind of like brusque macho poems that Irving Layton could write, of course, he was also quite capable of a great deal of tenderness, and I think that's what comes through in this poem, Song for Naomi. Who is that in the tall grasses singing by herself near the water? I cannot see her, but can it be her than whom the grasses so tall are taller? My daughter, my lovely daughter. Who is that in the tall grasses running beside her near the water? She cannot see there. Time that pursued her in the deep grasses so fast and faster, and caught her, my foolish daughter. What is the wind in the fair grass saying, like a verse near the water? Saviors that over all things have power, make time himself grow kind, and kinder that sought her, my little daughter. Who is that at the close of the summer near the deep lake? Who wrought her comely and slender? Time but attends and befriends her, than whom the grasses, though tall, are not taller, my daughter, my gentle daughter. And the next poem I'd like to read is the poem that is the poem that is now a song. And it's for Irving Layton's first wife, whose name was Aviva, or is Aviva. And the title of the poem is For Aviva Because I Love Her. And you'll hear as I recite the poem what a different kind of love poem it is, because it has to do with consumption and eating and so on. And so there's some tender violence involved in this love. For Aviva, because I love her, I saw a spider eating a huge bee. First he ate my limbs, and then he removed my head, feasting on the quivering jellies of my eyes and on what passes among bees for ears. And though dead, I could feel with each morsel he had that he enjoyed his repast, and I was glad. Afterwards he sliced me down the middle, exposing my insides to the burning midday heat, and slowly the voluptuous spider feasted on my jeweled organs, abolishing them one by one, till I was all gone, all swallowed up, except for my love of you. Except for my love of you. My radiant wings, these he did not touch, but left glinting in the sun. Thank you for Irving. And now, James Rolfe, maestro extraordinaire. Oh, the bio.
We can do that.
Okay, we do that.
Sorry.
I saw a spider eating a huge bee. First he ate my limbs, and then he removed my head, feasting on the quivering jellies of my eyes, and on what passes among bees for ears. And though dead, I could feel with each morsel he had that he enjoyed his repast, and I was glad. Afterwards, he sliced me down the middle, exposing my insides to the burning midday heat, and slowly the voluptuous spider feasted on my jeweled organs, abolishing them one by one, till I was all gone, all swallowed up, all except for my love
All right, here is the bio for James, which I should have memorized already. Composer and singer James Rolfe's music has been performed by ensembles, orchestras, choirs, and opera companies in Canada and abroad, and recognized with a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Jules Leger Prize, and Dora and Juno Award nominations. And so, another round of applause for James Rolfe. And also I should have this memorized by now. Pianist Juliet Palmer's music has found its way to a highway off-ramp, a swimming pool, a boxing ring, and to concert halls across North America, Europa, and Oceania, from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Juliet makes her home in Toronto. And I'll just add very quickly that Juliet and James have become that most noble of couples' grandparents.
My goodness, how are you going to follow that? Fortunately, I'm used to it. Fortunately, I'm used to it. As you can see, all my life I've struggled with lecturers that are taller than I am. But let us begin. So thank you so much for coming out on this miserable evening. Yeah, the snow just happened to come along with all your warm bodies, and we're so grateful to have you all here. Thank you very much. Couldn't do it without you. So I'm going to now pretend I'm Gwendolyn MacEwen. I want to tell a Gwendolyn MacEwen story. So when I was writing poetry back, this would have been maybe in the 80s or 90s. It must have been late 80s. Gwendolyn MacEwen was poet in residence at U of T. I was writing a long poem, and it had been inspired by Riccio, who's a great Greek poet. And of course, she was a fan of his too. She did translations of his work, which I didn't know then. Anyway, I phoned her at U of T, and I said, you know, Gwendolyn, and I'm working on this poem. And it was a long poem, which turned into a chapbook. And she said, oh, come over and see me. And you know, I was too chicken to go. I didn't go. And to this day, I cannot forgive myself for passing up that great opportunity to have a conversation with her, and who knows where that might have gone. So this is my one huge regret around Gwendolyn. So anyway, this evening I'm here to share her poetry with you. And I'll just give you a brief bio of her first. I'm sorry, I have my back over here. I don't feel this is right. Gwendolyn MacEwen was born in Toronto, 1941 to 1987. She died far, far too young, and I would say a tragic death. Her first published poem appeared in the Canadian Forum when she was 17. Canadian Forum rejected me. She left school at 18 to concentrate on writing. Her work is included in most major Canadian anthologies. She pursued her passion in poetry, especially Eastern alphabets such as the Hebraic, the Greek, the Arabic, and even Egyptian hieroglyphics. Her poems often embrace characters from classical myth or historical personages such as Lawrence of Arabia. Briefly married to PEI poet Milton Acorn, their opposites attract relationship is the stuff of legend. Yes, it is. MacEwen twice won the Governor General's Award for Poetry, with the second one being a posthumous triumph. We wish to extend our thanks to MacEwen's nephew, David McKinnon, who granted James Rolfe permission to score 2 of MacEwen's poems. So I'm going to read, before I read the poem, the first poem that James set to music, I'm just going to share 2 poems from one of her collections. It was the volumes, and this is from the early years. She does indeed work a lot in myth, and her work on myth is phenomenal. But I've chosen 2 poems that don't follow that tradition. And the first one, given the times, I thought this one is an especially apt poem, and I want to dedicate it to all the innocent people trapped in terrible, terrible wars all over this planet, in Yemen, in Syria, in so many places, in Ukraine, in Iraq, and especially the innocent victims such as children and animals. We always forget the animals as well. All these innocent victims that are caught in the trappings of power. This poem is called The Child Dancing. There's no way I'm going to write about the child dancing in the Warsaw Ghetto in his body of rags. There were only 2 corpses on the pavement that day, and the child I will not write about had a face as pale and trusting as the moon. So did the boy with the green belly full of dirt lying by the roadside in a novel by Kazantzakis, and the small girl T.E. Lawrence wrote about, who they found after a Turkish massacre with one shoulder chopped off, crying, "Don't hurt me, Baba." I don't feel like slandering them with poetry. The child who danced in the Warsaw Ghetto to some music no one else could hear had moon eyes, no green horror and no fear, but something worse. A simple desire to please the people who stayed, to watch him shuffle back and forth, his feet wrapped in the newspapers of another ordinary day. And this poem is called Jewelry. I wear it more to be as captive than to captivate. I want to be the prisoner of gold, to hear my voice break through the chain which holds my song in check, or watch the tendons flicker under the band about my wrist, which makes my gestures conscious and restrained. The circular earrings, familiar as my name, have tamed my mind as a single ring has tamed my hand. You have made a glittering prison of all my jewelry. You knew I never wanted to be free. That's kind of good about jewelry, I think. Now I'm going to read Water, which is the first song that James is going to perform for you. Water is from the T.E. Lawrence poems, you know, Lawrence of Arabia, and this would be in his voice. When you think of it, water is everything, or rather, water ventures into everything and becomes everything. It has all tastes and moods imaginable. Water is history, and the end of the world is water also. I have tasted water from London to Mirenshaw. In France, it tasted of crusaders' breastplates, swords, and tunnels of rings on ladies' fingers. In the springs of Lebanon, water had no color and was therefore all colors. Outside of Damascus, it disguised itself as snow and let itself be chopped and spooned into the stunned red grapes of summer. For years, I have defended water, even though I am told there are other drinks. Water will never lie to you, even when it insinuates itself into someone else's territory. Water has style. Water has no conscience and no name. Water thrives on water, is self-quenching. It often tastes of brine and ammonia and always knows its way back home. When you want to travel very far, do as the Bedouins do. Drink to overflowing when you can, and then go sparingly between wells.
When you think of it, water is everything. Or rather, water ventures into everything and becomes everything. It has all tastes and moods imaginable. Water is history, and the end of the world is water also. I have tasted water from London to Marancha. In France it tasted of crusaders' breastplates, swords, and tunnels of rings on ladies' fingers. In the springs of Lebanon, water had no color, and was therefore all colors. Outside of Damascus, it disguised itself as snow, and let itself be chopped and spooned onto the stunned red grapes of summer. For years I have defended water, even though I am told there are other drinks. Water will never lie to you, even when it insinuates itself into someone else's territory. Water has style. Water has no conscience and no shame. Water thrives on water, is self-quenching. It often tastes of brine and ammonia, and always knows its way back home. When you want to travel very far, do as the Bedouins do. Drink to overflowing when you can, and then go sparingly between wells.
And now I'm going to read the desert. Only God lives there in the seductive nothing that implodes into pure light. English makes him an ugly monosyllable, but Allah breathes the fiery music from his tongue, ignites the sands, invents a terrible love that is the very name of pain. The desert preserves him as the prophets found him, massive and alone. They went there into that awful zero to interpret him, for himself to know, for he said, "Help me. I am the one who is alone, not you. Tell me who I am." Camels lean into the desert, lost in some thought so profound it can only be guessed. When will God invent man? When will the great dream end? My skin crawls with a horrible beauty in this nothingness, this everything. I fall to my knees in the deep white sand, and my head implodes into pure light.
Only God lives there in the seductive nothing that implodes into pure light. English makes him an ugly monosyllable. But Allah breathes a fiery music from his tongue, ignites the sands, invents a terrible love that is the very name of pain. The desert preserves him as the prophets found him, massive and alone. They went there into that awful zero to interpret him for himself to know. For he said, help me, I am the one who is alone, not you. Tell me who I am. Tell me who I am. Camels lean into the desert, lost in some thought so profound it can only be guessed. When will God invent man? When will the great dream end? My skin crawls with a horrible beauty in this nothingness, this everything. I fall to my knees in the deep white sand, and my head implodes into pure light.
That's fine. That's great. Thank you. Our third poet for this evening, Moritz, is the sixth poet laureate of Toronto. His recent books include As Far As You Know, 2020, and The Sparrow, selected poems from 2018. Both are available through House of Anansi Press. In 2015, Princeton University Press republished his 1986 volume in the Princeton Series of Contemporary Poets, the tradition. He's published 19 books of poems, and as well as several volumes of poetry translated from French and Spanish. His poetry has received the Griffin Poetry Prize, the Guggenheim Fellowship, the Award in Literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the Beth Hogan Prize from Poetry Magazine, as well as other awards. And without further ado, I will bring George back up to read some of the poetry. Thank you.
Al.
Oh, I'm sorry. Al. Al is here.
Yeah, I'm right over here.
All right. My apologies. Al, please come up and thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, I'm always a surprise. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition, right? So, thank you. This is wonderful. What great songs. And I get to sit over there and watch the pianist's hands, and it reminds me of, history going way back. You know, I knew Layton and I knew Gwendolyn MacEwen, but one of my favorite characters from history and art is Franz Liszt. And Franz Liszt is the person who created this. He was the first person to turn the piano sideways, open up the lid so it would be a soundboard, and he called his performances recitals because he wanted to get the prestige of being a poet. He wanted to recite like a poet, and he would create his own posters, and it was said, Herr Liszt will recite at the piano on such and such a day. He always said that. So that's a little piece of history that comes down to us from the great composer and pianist, Franz Liszt.
Al, you think you must go?
Oh, yes, good idea. Comb my beard now. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you very much. It's kind of... Okay, that was some of my peanut gallery. Thanks a hell of a lot. Okay, so my poetry reading is, I'm just going to take it from the book from which James's song comes. And James's song is called Marigolds. And he's chosen out of it, in a sense, an essential part, or George and he together have chosen out of the book an essential part. Because the marigold sort of turns out to be the symbol of symbols, the most central symbol in the book. Now, the book is about the summer of George Floyd, so what does a marigold have to do with that? Well, and the book is about the summer of George Floyd in a very strange way, because it's mainly about the 1992 race uprising in Los Angeles in May 1992, called South Central Los Angeles at that time. So that's what the book's about. And but there I am, sitting in my garden writing about these things and trying to participate in them or be one with them, and also being quite far away. So it was leading me to think about the commonality of things, how certain kinds of energy and so on run through everything. And so I began thinking about music, I began thinking about poetry, I began thinking about great poetry, as defined by books and tradition, and the poetry of music and of the streets and so on. And so in here I quote some of that, and in fact the poem itself is soaked in American popular music and folk music. Well, folk music is only what people who consider themselves universal consider regional popular music. That's all it is. Right? So what I'm going to read is the beginning part, which will take about 4 or 5 minutes, that gives you the context, and then I'm going to move to the part from which is nearby, from which James's lyrics come, and I'm going to, read a little bit around the lyrics so that you get a little bit of their context, okay? So here's the opening part of this, which takes us back at the beginning to 1992. The television played the beating of a king, again and again, never-ending beating, just to inform us now in 1992, 24 years after the murder of our great king. Now it's another, Rodney King, construction worker, poor, with his police record put against him with the leather and sticks of the police in the video of his arrest a year ago. The strikes to his face are brought back again, informing us over and over, the images replayed, remade on television, now that it was news again, not fade away history any longer. Now the police had been set free again. The jury in suburban Simi Valley just has found them not guilty of what we could see, of what we had to see. And Rodney stayed being beaten on television for being black, in black and white video that clarifies his troubles, being beaten on television for having little but troubles, that crime. And Dr. King had been dispatched, shot away 1968 by the nation of moonshots and citizen snipers, shot safely, they thought, to eternity for the sin of wishing them well. So they were left, the unworthy, the failed regents of justice here, of that banished poetry. Were you there when they crucified my Lord, when they nailed him to a tree? Yes, you were there. And now again in 2020, were you there when they crucified George Floyd? You were there when they nailed him with a knee into the concrete. Lord, don't let it be that you're being lynched on a tree ever and again as on a loop in hell, a video we repeat of a being beaten. Oh, don't let it be the image of what we are, of what we always must do, but establish the justice, the poetry that you were and are to be, the poetry that we kill you for. So that's the introductory section of the poem. And so I'm going to just read a bit and then flip to the part where, to give a little context, and flip to the part where the lyrics come from. And this will introduce why the marigold is in here. So after that part, that is sort of brings in contemporary events, contemporary in 1992, contemporary in 2020. Suddenly the mood changes and you go to sort of symbolic romantic nature poetry. The garden in the midst. Poetry and the garden where it works, unwinding itself from the skein of nothingness. Poem and garden walled off are pierced, penetrated, and are helpless, open to everything, seen and unseen. The sawtooth acetylene shriek of the airplane passing over and soothed to drone by deep distance. or the hush of tires from the far highway, our surf here in the depths of this continent of concrete, auto waves crumbling asphalt coasts of the Central Sea, humans who roll over one another, composing, decomposing, ceaseless motion that doesn't move in the worldwide eye, unblinking in the world's breast that breathes as though asleep, sleeping unbroken as though dead, the world material in which the human wave passes as a form of torsion, of anxiety. The wave rises and is allayed by its exhaustion, dying away to rise again in the body that merely lies, while poetry and the garden in the midst stretch out their roots and leaves. Their action is no stronger than a flower. For instance, this marigold. We'll switch ahead to the lyrics now. And think of the color of my favorite kind of marigold, the kind that's maroon and gold. It has the blood color almost, or dried blood color, and a maroon. So the shining of gold, dark and blinding bright by turns. The sun falling from blue clouds into the ocean, and noon and dawn, all folded and held up, carried, offered on motionless petals, fingers, rays unchanged through all the day's seasons and the night under spectral, low-watted garden bulbs. Unchanged marigold, except you always are born, flower, last in decay, and mummified brown and stiff stand in the snowy mud, shedding seeds. Mary's gold, your flower primal gold above and red gold underneath, streaked with rust and blood, earth ochre, stain of red clay, knife wound, spike and spear thrust, wrists tightly bound, thorns, menses, a dripping scalpel line, the 7 sorrows, 7 darts that sum up all cuts, lopping the human parts away perpetually, the darts that are your seeds, that grow in, pierce, harrow, fall from, and are your heart. And that's the word on which the lyric part of James's beautiful song ends.
The shining of gold, dark and blinding bright by turns, the sun falling from blue clouds into the ocean, and noon and dawn, all unfolded and held up, carried, offered on motionless petals, fingers, rays unchanged through all the day's seasons and the night under spectral, low-watted garden bulbs. Unchanged marigold, except you always, always are born, flower, last and decay.
Fantastic indeed. Well, what a rich feast we've had. What a wonderful experience to be a poet and to have your poetry changed into something so splendid, James. Thank you so very much. You can understand. You know, it completely transforms the poem. It is not just, it's a completely new work. And you can understand why on that Christmas morning with subterfuge, I moved before the screen expecting some kind of family do. And then I got to hear my poem Namesake put to some wonderful music by James. And we're so lucky, so very lucky to have had this experience as poets and as an audience to be here and enjoy and appreciate the profundity of the poems and the music. Yeah, thank you so very much. Poets, yeah, an audience. So I'm now going to introduce Ayesha, our next poet, who's going to read her work, and then it will be followed by James and Juliet. Or is Usha, are you singing? Oh, sorry. Usha is singing. Oh, no, where's Usha? Karen. I'm sorry. I hope you don't mind. I have to find her bio somewhere. But there's just too much paper in the world, don't you find? Well, let me see if I can find it. And I just want to say the reason I called Karen Usha is because we were lucky enough to go to one of her last concert where she shared a good deal of her history. And that, of course, is her Sri Lankan name. And so we get to call her both names. Now, I'm still looking. Well, I have to find it. Well, I hope you'll excuse me. I don't seem to have it. Usha, could you give us your Karen, can you perhaps tell us a little bit about your bio was very short, and I felt very abbreviated. So perhaps when you come up to perform, you can tell us a little bit about how you came to music. That would be wonderful. And I will now go ahead and introduce Ayesha. Born and raised in Kolkata, India, Ayesha Chatterjee has lived in England, the USA, and Germany, and is now based in Toronto. She is the author of 2 poetry collections, The Clarity of Distance and Bottles and Bones. Her latest publication is in Transcontinental Ether, a bilingual anthology released in June 22 by Collusion Books. Chatterjee is past president of the League of Canadian Poets and chair of the League's Feminist Caucus.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ayesha, and I am really excited to be here. And thank you all for coming out in this crazy weather. Winter is here early, and anyway, I'm so happy to be here. I've been excited about this for a while now because it's the first in-person anything I've done in quite a while, and it's lovely to be in a room full of actual people. What a revelation. I'd like to say a great big thank you to George Eliot Clark for including me in tonight's lineup, which is stellar and just a little bit intimidating, but I'm going to pretend to be as cool as a cucumber for the next 10 minutes. So I understand that it's being live streamed, and so I decided I'd start with a poem that I think might be fitting for that. This poem is called Disassociation, and it was first published in a magazine called Guest, which is Ottawa-based. So a big shout out to Rob Glennon, who is the publisher, and to Natalie Hanner, who is the guest editor for this particular issue. So here we go. Disassociation. I am making a movie in which I play myself. In one scene, I walk through streets with massive, brutish buildings bearded in icicles, the walls pocked with protrusions, each one grotesque as a furuncle from a prehistoric disease. Mostly, I'm wearing an emerald sari, thick silk with silver brocade, completely unsuitable. The difficulty lies in staying in character. I say such things as, what a hinky situation, which I'd never do, and then I hate myself. I'll have to cut those scenes. Also the ones with the sari. Then there's her voice, so much like mine that I taste salt, which may or may not be shared blood, or tropical sweat, or merely an ordinary chemical reaction. Becoming her requires abstinence and fervent belief. Breathe into her, they say, to make her animate. All that footage, I shall have to prune it down and prune it down to change her fortune, as God might, to make her more like me. Thank you. I've got two more poems that I'd like to read before we get to the one that James so beautifully set to music. This next one is from the revised edition. I can see better with that. From the revised edition of my first collection, which is The Clarity of Distance, and it's published by Aeolus House. And my amazing publisher is here tonight, Alan Breezemaster. He's just such a wonderful human being. He is an amazing, he's just one of the biggest supporters of poetry in the city and in the country. And he's a great poet as well as a terrific editor and publisher. So thank you, Alan, and hi. So the poem I'd like to read is about the city that I grew up in. And I'm going home, which is always somewhere else, I think, for someone who travels as much as I do. Names have so much meaning, and I think, and it's not just people, but it's places as well. And this city is no longer known by the name that I knew it as when I was growing up, and that was Calcutta. So it instantly dates me. It's Kolkata these days. But this poem is about Calcutta. Nothing exists here outside your mind. Not the flickering building, trees growing sideways from sandy walls. Not the whitewashed children with letters carved red over their hearts. It used to be that history excluded them, but not anymore, though literature died after the war. And then the roads, straggling into dust, dyed in 60s shades of rock and roll, fiercely loved. So, there's, I'd like to read one poem from my second collection, which is Bottles and Bones, and most of the poems in that collection are about the sense of smell and the lack of a sense of smell, and about perfumery and the myths around the botanicals that go into perfumes and things. But there are a few poems that are not about perfume and smell, and I'm going to read one of those today. It's called Vanta Black. I don't know if anybody knows what Vanta Black is. I read about it a few years ago in one of these obscure news articles, but it was just fascinating. It's a man-made substance, which is the darkest substance known to humankind. It's so dark that it absorbs 99.965%, I got this from Wikipedia, of light. But it's fascinating because when you look at it, it's like looking into deep space or something. It's completely black. So there's this illusion. If you see it against anything else, you'll see all of this color and then nothing, and it's very disconcerting. It sort of made the news, I don't know, a few years ago, because it's been used a lot by the Indian-British artist Anish Kapoor, who uses it in his sculptures and his art. And he made there was quite a kerfuffle because he has actually bought exclusive rights to use Vanta Black in the art world. So as you can imagine, other artists were not very amused by that. Anyway, so this is Vanta Black, and it was, this poem was actually sparked by an actual conversation I had at a poetry reading, actually. So, last night, I met a physicist who said he had 10 years left to research the existence of God. I spent all day today a figment of my own imagination, breathing outside time, eliminating everything except resistance. Okay. So this is it. This is the poem that James set to music, and it's just brilliant. I think Ian has mentioned how it's a transformation from one art form to another, and that truly is the case. I feel like it's two transformations actually. It's the transformation from poetry into music, but then there's the transformation from the music as it stands on the page when it's interpreted by a singer. And so those two steps kind of are art forms in and of themselves. And I'm really excited to hear Karen sing it. I've collaborated with Karen before on a number of other pieces that were composed by David Yeager, and she's an amazing singer. So I'm really, really excited to hear it. I've heard an early version of this, and I loved it. There's a lightness of touch to the song, which is just brilliant. Anyway, so this is The Way Spring Jabs. The way spring jabs at winter, each small leaf a soldier, death unthinkable. When the sickly honeysuckle thrusts its brown vine into the air, no one notices. Camouflaged, it curls like clay, but stays. Death is everywhere, napkined in snow. So soft against the ear, it must be a mistake. Still, we carry on, imagination shrinking with the rain. The coming warmth, a myth to be believed. In a sort of synchronicity, people open doors and close them, letting no one in except themselves, lifting alter egos out of boxes tinged with disappointment. It is just enough to hold on to what is left as the first spiders skitter over tiles and set their endless traps, sparkling every now and then with dross.
just say that George was the culprit. He had it. 'Cause I had to rescue him earlier.
Always.
By giving him my papers. But here is a brief bio. Singer Karen Usha is a soprano who transcends her classical training and brings her versatility to a variety of genres and audiences locally and abroad. And please add anything you would like.
Thank you so much. At least you got the first part in, so I know. I will just add that I was born and raised in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and started my musical journey there at a very young age. Been so fortunate to now be in this land of milk and honey and pursue the one thing that has kept me alive all these years. So I thank you, George, for inviting me back to sing as part of this series. And this time I'm singing two pieces composed by James. And as Ayesha said, I am a little nervous because, you know, the poets and the composer and my vocal professor is watching online. Darrell Edwards, Professor Darrell Edwards, so no pressure here. But anyway, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Don't go away.
Okay, well, I have to get my phone so it will go away.
Thank you. I shall too take off my mask. Our final poet for this evening is also in the room. Giovanna Riccio is a poet, a teacher, an independent scholar. She's the author of Vittorio, Strong Bread, and Plastics Republic, which has been shortlisted for the 2022 Bressani Prize. Her poems have been translated into 6 languages, and her writing has appeared in national and international publications and in numerous anthologies. She's the 2022 winner of the, I'm going to say this wrong, the Venera Fazio Prize.
2021 winner.
I'm sorry, 2021.
Yeah.
Thank you. She can be found at www.giovannariccio.com.
That's right. And here, and I'm here.
And you're here. And you should be here.
May I guide you back?
You may. Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you.
All right. Well, so I'm going to read the poem that started all of this. So this is a poem. It's from my first collection, Strong Bread. And it's a poem called Namesake. And it's about taking my name back. So back in the day when I immigrated from Italy, and one was registered at school, and their good imperialist way, the British had no trouble telling you that your name is no longer Giovanna, it's now Joan. I want to say that going from a name like Giovanna, which is, as Italian, is very polysyllabic, and to blunt one syllable, it made me think of the Gwendolyn MacEwen talking about monosyllables too in one of her poems. Anyway, it struck me when I was thinking back on it that perhaps I must have looked stupid, because when the teacher called out this Joan, I probably didn't answer. Why would I, right? So then in my 40s, I decided I would take my name back. And so this is a little bit about how I came to do that, along with a few other things. It's a longish poem, so I'm just going to read the one poem. I'm not going to read anything else. It was shortened for the composition by Mr. George over here. Namesake. A small stranger was waving from a distant Italian port. Every night she walked through the crevices of my broken sleep and tugged on my spinal cord, pointing me to that hard country that had sent me away. I can still see the oak floor, the teacher unrolling my R's, clipping my name, Joan. Joan? I don't know if that blunt one syllable turned my head, but everywhere English flattened Italian. And when my father snipped my impractical long hair, I looked away, pretended those orphaned ringlets belonged to someone else. Blonde, blue-eyed goddesses who never ate garlic filled the temples of the Golden Book Encyclopedia. The face of ancient Rome belonged to our teacher now, but blinded statues and pictures, old sun threaded in the cracks of fallen ruins, were calling me. When this column in my spine shifted, my bones stiffened to keep in that mute, abandoned stranger. That summer she beckoned, carved messages into my aching shoulders and unyielding sacrum. She seized my hip joints and forced me toward her fluttering hand. My fingers clutched the boarding pass. I remember the airplane lifting me to a warm, unknowing sleep. Sudden morning opening onto old stone. July heat rusting on palm trees, wind cupped in the umbrella pines, and everywhere taxis, taxis. I rode back into my dusty body, into Rome's dusky fall, echoing in the stone. I wandered with tourists into the navel of the Colosseum. Mad emperors, gypsies, soothsayers wove into the crowd. I wove into an ancient stand of columns, not knowing anymore who to walk with, but walking, the cobblestones rippling through my heels, my hands cooled by modest waters of the turtle fountain at the entrance of the old Jewish ghetto. I don't remember climbing, only standing eye level with billowing cupolas and angels stepping off buildings. From the Italian stone, my numbed blood flowed naturally. I heard my name calling from a balcony, Giovanna! Our old housebound language free in the rowdy streets, songs we had hummed sotto voce, singing at the tops of their voices. I rested, leaning on the smoky marble's mineral veins. Everywhere there were steps leading to cathedrals, museums, ornate palazzos, carefully chiseled waves narrowing away from the crowd, rising toward doors opening in. Doors I kept opening to dance with Etruscan women and talk with Vittoria Colonna to find Queen Giovanna of Naples. Impossible stone flowed everywhere that summer. Familiar figures I had never seen before gestured to me from the rooftops. And because I could accept the gesture, the blunt sound softened. My tongue, my bones grew more porous, and the child I had locked away flowed out of the hardness into my voice and gave me my name. Thank you.
I can still see the oak floor, the teacher unrolling my arms, clipping my name. Joan! Joan! I don't know if that one blunt syllable turned my head, but everywhere English flattened Italian. And when my father snipped my practical long hair, I looked away, pretending those orphan ringlets belonged to someone else. Blonde, blue-eyed goddesses who never ate garlic filled the temples of the Golden Book Encyclopedia. The face of ancient Rome belonged to a teacher now. But blinded statues in pitches, old sun threaded in the cracks of fallen ruins, were calling me. Later, my fingers clutched the boarding pass. I remember the airplane lifting me to a warm and glowing sleep. Sudden morning opening onto leaning on the smoky marbles mineral veins. Impossible stone float everywhere that summer. Familiar figures I had never seen before gestured to me from the rooftops. And because I could accept the gesture, my blunt sound softened, my tongue, my bones grew more porous, and the child I had looked away flowed out of the harness into my voice and gave me my name and gave me my name.
Oh my golly.
Stephen,
Yeah. Whoa! Oh my golly. I just want to say once again, what a great honor and pleasure it is to share this evening. An evening of great gifts from poets and singers and the composer and the pianist. Wow! This has been so transformative, transcendent. Just terrific, and so we are also honored. I mean, it's so beautiful how all this has just come together so magically and incredibly, and through just associations of one sort or another. So the next poet, who's not unfortunately able to be here because he didn't know and I didn't know that we're going to be reading his one of his poems tonight and doing a song, a beautiful song that James has composed. But I've always admired his work. His name is Stephen Morrissey. He's based in Montreal. I've always admired his work. I wrote a couple of reviews of some of his stuff back in the early 90s, and luckily for me, he kind of remembered those reviews and I liked them. I'm glad he did, and so on. And so he reached out to me last year, I think it was, or something like that, not too long ago, maybe last year, and we started a correspondence, and he sent me a book to read and write a blurb for, which is about history of poetry in Montreal, but another book as well on his own personal relationship with different poets, including Allen Ginsberg, who really expanded his mind and his poetics, Mr. Morrissey. So I'm going to read his bio, and then I'll read the poem. The thing I really love about Stephen Morrissey is that he writes about love in ways that are both very plain and plangent, powerful, and it's hard to do, and I think he does it extremely well. So anyway, here is his bio. Montreal-born poet Stephen Morrissey is the author of 12 books, including poetry and literary criticism. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree, honors in English with distinction from Sir George Williams University in 1973. In 1976, he graduated with a Master of Arts degree in English Literature from McGill University. In the 1970s, Morrissey was associated with the Vehicle poets. Now, yeah, I like to say it, Vehicle poets, absolutely. The Stephen Morrissey Phones, 1963 to 2014, are housed at Rare Books and Special Collections of the McLennan Library at McGill University. Stephen Morrissey married poet Carolyn Zonilo in 1995. You may visit Mr. Morrissey at www.stephenmorrissey.ca. And by the way, Morrissey is spelled M-O-R-R-I-S-S-E-Y, so it's the full service Morrissey. And I want to thank him for getting the bio to me today, because again, in fact, James wrote to me today and said, aren't we doing Stephen Morrissey? And I thought, no, we hadn't really thought we were going to. But anyway, we are doing Stephen Morrissey. And like, unfortunately, because we hadn't planned it in advance, I don't have more than the single poem to read. And we have the time. I'm glad that we do. And the poem, again, it's extremely simple but very poignant. And I think that everyone here who has ever loved or loved somebody else will be appreciative of this poem. So bless you. All right. Asleep in Her Arms by Stephen Morrissey. Isn't this what I've waited for? To sleep in her arms. Return to the warmth of a woman's body, curves and softness against bone and flesh. She is the one I come to life in, the woman whose presence returns me to life. There is no other like her, the one I love, the one who is my other half, the one whose hand I hold, the one whose company I desire, the one who makes the moon white and full. I think of other men alone at night. During the day, they search for a woman to bring them light. Love transforms, ignites an inner fire, burns long and bright in the human heart. What makes the full moon white and round but love? What makes the trees grow and the fields green with life? Only love. Or the river flow, fish breaking the calm surface at dusk. Sky red with setting sun and grass cold with dew.
Isn't this what I've waited for? To sleep in her arms, return to the warmth of a woman's body, curves and softness against bone and flesh. She is the one I come to life in, the woman whose presence returns me to life. There is no other like her, the one I love, the one who is my other half, the one whose hand I hold, the one whose company I desire, the one who makes the moon white and full. I think of other men alone at night. During the day they search for a woman to bring them light. Love transforms, ignites an inner fire, burns long and bright in the human heart. setting sun and a grass cold with dew. Only I just wanted to add a clarification. It was mentioned before Giovanna read that she was the last poet. Obviously, that's not quite the case. In fact, we're coming up to the last poet, none other than my colleague and dear friend George. And I just wanted to preface that by saying that there are really, there are a lot of people I should thank. The evening is not long enough for that, but first of all, in reference to what Ayesha said about the thrill of hearing her words set, it's thrilling for me, really is, to set these words. They're wonderful. I only set words that are wonderful, and they're all, I connect with them all deeply, emotionally, and it's a great privilege not just to write them, but that people will actually listen to me sing them, and other wonderful singers, such as Usha, singing them. But two people, first of all, my partner, colleague, and wife, Juliet Palmer, and yes, co-grandparent, as of 2 months ago. She has been a wonderful support and collaborator in this whole process, without which I couldn't really have pulled this off, especially during COVID when we couldn't play or sing with anyone else except ourselves in the same house, and that's been a real lifeline artistically, and it's been quite a wonderful personal experience as well. I think I can speak for you.
Amen to that.
Thank you. And of course George, and George's initial enthusiasm and generosity, and just the spark of that idea to have a Christmas present for Giovanna has morphed into this project, and I think I really speak for a lot of people that that generosity, enthusiasm, that vision, that he's a bit of a locomotive in a good way. I really appreciate it, and likewise it's been a lifeline to have this project to work on. So thanks, George. And yes, amen. And that's partly by way of introduction to our last poet, George Eliot Clark.
Oh, man.
I have a little bio of George that I'm going to share with you. But I really don't need a bio of George. But I do need a bio to tell you how many books he's written. Because George writes so many books. And so I have special shelves on my own bookshelves of all of George's books. And I keep having to remove poets from because I have to find room for his books. So I have to keep rearranging things. So let's see, George Eliot Clark is the 4th poet laureate of Toronto, which is the position Al now holds, of course, and the 7th poet laureate of Canada. He's written 7 collections. Get out. You've written more than 7 collections. He's written 7 collections, 5 verse plays, 5 story suites, 4 epic tomes, 3 verse novels, 3 libretti, 1 children's work, and 1 title each in, I have to do it, George, and 1 title each in Chinese, Italian, and Romanian. George.
Wow. Wow. I thank Giovanna for that wonderful intro. I thank James. I thank Juliet for coming together to do that Christmas present almost 2 years ago. it's amazing how fast those 2 years have gone, but it's also amazing how much we've been able to do with so many different poets and different styles and so on. And I just want to say, I have loved everything tonight. I've loved all of the songs. I've loved all the different ways that poets have come to say what they say, to do what they do, to believe what they believe, and to share that with us. I'm not name dropping here, but I will say that one of the great things in my life as a poet was being able to break bread with the late Derek Walcott. And again, I am not name dropping here. I want to say, I also had a glass of wine with Allen Ginsberg. So if I want to get into name dropping, I'm going to do that. But it'll come to me. But to get to the point of the Derek Walcott name drop, right? Now we actually ended up having supper a couple times together, and I love the fact I made him laugh. I mean, I just made him laugh. He was asking me different things about who was going to win the 2012 election, and I said it was going to be Obama in the U.S. and I talked about Nova Scotia and so on. But he kept asking me questions, and I kept saying things that got him laughing. And it's like a great memory of me seeing him like just lean back in his chair and just laugh. And I was so happy because I thought, I wonder how many people actually helped this great poet just lean back and laugh. So I was happy I was able to do that with him. But he also said a few things to me that were really so profound. And a couple of things came back to me tonight as I was listening to the poets and the songs. And it was this. One of the things he said that came back to me viscerally tonight. The poem is always smarter than the poet. A simple and very profound statement. The poem is always smarter than the poet. And what I take from that is that the composer, in this case, James, sees in the poems what the poets may never have seen originally. Because the poem is smarter than the poet. We think we know what we are doing when we write a poem. And we hope that we have it straight in our minds, and in our hearts, what we're doing. But then when the composer or a composer reads deeply into those words, there is something else, another order of philosophy, another order of insight comes into existence, which transforms what we thought we were doing into what it really is supposed to be, what it really can be. And that does not detract in any way, shape, or form from our art. But what it does is remind us of the humility that we need to have as poets in working with this beautiful and extremely difficult medium of words, to be reminded of the absolute magic that is independent of us, that exists in that order of words. And that, in this case, James Rolfe, Juliet Palmer, find their way into these works and finds what is transcendent in them, in that universal language that is music, and then reproduces them in ways, or produces them in ways in which they enter the world with their magic reinforced in ways that no one can ignore. So I just want to say how humbled I am to be in the presence of great words, great voices, great music, and to enjoy this, to live with this. This is an incredible honor. So having said all that, and it's almost 9 o'clock, I got to end. We have to end, and I'm going to end with this poem, which James has set to music, and it's a kind of an odd poem to end on after all of the beautiful and luxurious works that we've heard. It's called Bombastic, and it is a bit tongue-in-cheek. I thought, because I've been told through my career as a poet, from the time I was a teenage poet, you're bombastic, right? And I think, oh, okay, I'm bombastic, all right. And so I started to think of this poem to answer those critics, And I started to write it, and I ended up with all these ig sounds. So you're going to hear a lot of it. A signaling colossal pygmy, a hunchback igbo igor. I don't know why I got the ig sound in there, ig sound, but it just seems like reinforce the idea of you're bombastic. So here it is, bombastic. The problem is I'm bombastic. Drastically bombastic due to the minstrelsy buffoonery of being a yellowed cartoon black, a second-hand black, a kind of discounted black, being really only tan or brown, a souvenir of miscegenation, a signally colossal pygmy, a hunchbacked igbo igor, talent worth less than a chigger-plagued pig, talent that's only a figment of my Pygmalion gigolo vocab itself not big, alluding to my obligatory pigment, my oil-crude black-ass nymph zigzags this white sheet gig, my squibs unniggardly yet niggling, see my nagging ego jag and jig. Always was I an ignoramus like Captain Quig, meager if eager to league as a worthy figure, the Antigone of Antigonish, who ligatures together earthy swigs of igneous molten spittle grammar beleaguered. I was less zelig than Rigoletto. Unambiguous roared the guffaws as if lauding follies Ziegfeld. Dervishes all whirligigs and trigonal shindigs and applause symphonic Edvard Grieg contiguous. What a stigma my intrigue be! What ignorant and brazen bigotry to vaunt Negro rigs, these foul-spelled triggering sprigs, iffy schlot to spiffy, bewigged, proof-rock like prigs.
Just arranging a page turn here.
The wonderful one that you said, where's my bio?
George has it.
The problem is I'm bombastic, drastically bombastic, due to the minstrelsy buffoonery of being a yellowed cartoon black, a second-hand black, a kind of discounted black, being really only tan or brown, a souvenir of miscegenation, a signally colossal pygmy, a hunchbacked igbo igor, talent worth less than a chigger-plagued pig, talent that's only a figment of my Pygmalion gigolo vocab, itself not big, alluding to my obligatory pigments. My oil crude, a black-ass nib zigzags this white sheet gig. My squibs are niggardly, yet niggling. See my nagging ego jag and jig. Always was I an ignoramus like Captain Queeg, meager if eager to league as a worthy figure, the Antigone of Antigonish, who ligatures together earthy swigs of igneous molten spittle, grammar beleaguered. I was less zelig than Rigoletto. Unambiguous roared the guffaws as if lauding folly Ziegfeld. Dervishes all whirligigs in a trigonal shindigs and applause. Symphonic Edvard Grieg contiguous. What a stigma my intrigue be! What ignorant and brazen bigotry to vaunt foul-spelt triggering sprigs. Iffy schlock, too spiffy, proof rock-like prigs.
We need to express gratitude for the artistes who have presented their works this evening. I want to begin by thanking Ian White, once again, of East and West Learning Connections. And Yang Wang, who has been with us, who's also with the EAWLC, who's been with us from the very beginning, back in the spring of 2021, and has co-sponsored a number of these 5 poets with me. So I want to thank her once again, and Ian and East and West Learning Connections. I also want to thank Giovanna for the co-hosting once again, and of course, a wonderful, beautiful poem and poetry in general. I also want to thank Al Moritz and Ayesha Chatterjee, our 2 vibrant, brilliant poets who both gave extremely powerful and moving readings this evening. I also want to thank David McKinnon for giving us permission to do the Gwendolyn MacEwen pieces. I also want to thank Layton for allowing us to read the Irving Layton pieces. I want to thank Stephen Morrissey for sending the bio and, of course, producing the poetry and the single poem of his that we were able to do tonight and read tonight. And I also want to thank Karen for crying out loud. Karen! Woo! Karen, Usha, in the house! In the house! Woo! Rock and roll. My golly. We got to do this again. Crying out loud, we have to. And I also want to thank Juliet. Oh my golly. That was brilliant performances again. And James for also seeing this vision, both you and Juliet, seeing this vision, understanding it, appreciating it, working within it, and finding the stuff to admire in each of the very different poets that I have brought to you. And I should say very quickly that the way we worked, I've usually just given James a sheaf of poems, a number of pages, usually about a dozen or so, sometimes a bit less, sometimes a bit more. And I'll leave it to him, although I do write usually a page or 2 of my strong advice to really consider this particular poem, especially. And sometimes he does, but other times he goes his own way and he chooses something else. And I say, oh, okay, all right. And then I come to see just how good that piece is too. So I thank you, sir, for the magic of your compositions and for doing this. And one last thing, I should announce that you are putting together a CD.
That's right.
And it should be out sometime next year.
That's right, in the spring, though, we hope.
And so this music will be there in a permanent way. And I think I will also say, and I'm going to step off the stage right now, but I'm also going to say this, that I think that if I can, I am going to say it, look it. We've been blessed with, James has been blessed with Canada Council support, and we hope that there will be more and so on. But this really began simply as a sharing of a vision, a little tiny bit of capital, a little tiny bit, but really the desire to create a body of work that has not existed before. And I'm carried back to the days of the Renaissance. I'm carried back to the days of the Medicis, for crying out loud. And I want to throw in some poisoners too. You always need to have a poisoner or 2 whenever you're working on anything artistic, because it's a subtle way to get rid of somebody. Just right. But seriously, I mean, this whole idea of commissioning and bringing art into, bringing beauty into the world, I think it's something that everybody can do. all of us who have some means can do this and should do this. I'm going to die happy that I've helped to bring into the world, probably by the time this project is all done, it'll be like a few dozen songs by several different composers. And I'm not saying that about anything for myself. I'm just saying that I think that part of the charity of being any kind of artist is helping to create more art, helping to create more artistes, and sharing the wealth that is our work. So thank you all so very, very much for coming out tonight and for enjoying. Oh.